Right. So can somebody please remind me where we stopped? Because that note is also in my previous computer. I have made a note where we stopped. We were discussing about cables. Did we finish it? Did we discuss about coaxial cable and fiber optic? Yes, no? Yes. And then did we start the structured cabling? Structured cabling we started, right? And then right. So we discussed about patch panel. Anybody can remember where we stopped? I remember we talked about the patch panel. Now we discussed these ones also, no? Did we stop here? Can anybody remember where we stopped? Right. So I can remember I discussed you about up to here. So from here I will start and then continue. Okay. Right. So so different types of data will travel through the system. In structured cabling, we will find different types of data like I mean networking data or telephone voice, videos or security related data, right? So fire systems, we usually have a separate system because fire system is a critical system and we don't want to integrate it with other systems, because then if there is some issue in any other system, that can affect the reliability of the fire system, right? So other than that, everything else you can integrate to a structured cabling system. So these are the advantages and disadvantages. So in the cabling lecture also we discussed, right? So UTP is the advantages are relatively inexpensive and it's very widely available, right? So very like most of the people are familiar with the installation and everything. Those are the advantages. Main disadvantage is distance limitation and the problem of electromagnetic interferences. So fiber optic, high data rates are possible. You can use the cables to send the data for a long long distance, immune to EMI, right? So the problems are moderately expensive and it's a little bit difficult to install. Then when you come to wireless system, there are some distance limitations. Distance limitations are very low and relatively easy to install. Wireless, right? So wireless means you have to just install the points and do the set programming. Disadvantages can be atmospheric attenuation. So if there are any walls in between, right? So, and according to the climate conditions, sometimes there can be some problems. More expensive than cable media, right? So those are the disadvantages if you are using wireless. So this table shows you according to required data speed and your transmission distance, which kind of fiber optic to multi-mode and single mode, which kind of fiber optic cable you should use. Right. So when we do a fiber installation, usually if you think about a backbone cabling, from one point to the other point to transmit and receive data, you need 2 fibers, right? And then we keep another 2 for redundancy, because if something goes wrong in the 2, then you can use the other 2. And then if required, if it is a very critical application, we keep another 4 fiber for future use, right? So usually you use 8 fibers from one point to the other point, right? So that is in a backbone cabling situation. Right. So what is the backbone speed required, right? So now you know backbone cabling means the main cables that we send from the main equipment room to the telecommunication closet. So the speed is very much important, right? So then this is an example, right? So example is, right, backbone speed, if you want 100 megabits per second, right? And number of users at 10 megabits per second. That means assuming that one user should get 10 megabits per second. If you have 10 users, right? Then that means 10 into 10 megabits per second, right? So if you have 100 megabits per second data speed, right? 100 megabits per second data speed, if you are using 10 users and all of them are using 10 megabits per second, right? So they can use 10 megabits per second without any issue, right? So then we say the typical network delay is 0. There is no delay. And if all the users are using the network at the same time, right? Average utilization of the network per user is 100, means we assume like all the users will be using the system all the time, right? So if you are thinking of that, right? If you are thinking of that, then we can only use 10 users, because 10 into 10 megabits per second into 10 users is 100. So assuming all of them will be using the network at all the time or at the same time, then you can only use 10 users, but the users will not have any delay, right? Then another scenario is you have 100 megabits per second and you have 100 users, right? 100 users using 10 megabits per second. So here our, the assumption or the case is average utilization of network per user is 10%. That means we assume only about 10% of the users will be using the network like at a given time, right? So that means we assume there are, in the system you have 100 users. So 100 users into 10% is 10 users. 10 users into 10 megabits per second is 100 megabits per second. So we assume that we can put 100 users to this system where you have the backbone speed of 100 megabits per second. Why we assume that? Because we assume only 10% of the users will be using the network at any given time, right? So that is a normal case. So if you have number of users in a system, they will not all connect to the system at the same time, right? So assuming that only 10% of utilization will be there. So for a 100 megabits connection, you can allow 100 users, right? But the problem is if more than 10% of the users connect at a given time. So if that is the case, average delay will be small, right? So you will have a small delay when now the number of people goes more than 10%, but that will not be a very large issue, right? Then this is a worst scenario where you have 100 megabits per second speed and we are putting 1,000 users who are using 10 megabits per second, right? So then average utilization we have assumed is 1%. Right? So we are assuming only 1% of the users will be connecting at any given time, right? So that will be a problem because usually it will be more than 1%. And like according to the nature of the network, if you just assume that it is 1%, when there is a peak period, right? When there is a situation where all the people try to log in at one time, then there will be major delays. I hope you have experienced this when you want to submit an assignment to our university LMS. Right? Usually close to the deadline, most of the people try to upload. Then what will happen is the system will get down. Right? So anybody will not be able to access. But in usual situation, in normal time, you go to the LMS, you can work in the LMS without any issue. That is because at that time, the utilization or the number of people connecting is low. Right? So our system has been designed assuming that the number of people that will connect to the system at a given time is like very small percentage of the users, right? So that is how they have allocated all the speeds and servers and everything. But suddenly when everybody tries to log in, then the system goes down, right? So this is the critical part of the design, right? You have to decide according to the nature of your system, how many users will be average utilization, how many users will be usually connecting at a given time. So if you take a fair value for this one and do the design, then most of the time users will not get much problem, right? But in a peak situation, of course, there will be an issue, like everybody tries to log in at the same time. But then you cannot design a whole system assuming that everybody will log in at the same time, because that then your system will be very expensive, and most of the time that will not happen, right? So normally all the users will not try to log in at once. So assuming making that everybody will be assuming that everybody will be coming to the system at once and then doing the design will be a very expensive design. So usually what you have to do is you have to think of a fair value for this according to your system, and then according to that decide the speeds that is required. Right, so general office environment where the small emails and Word files are being used, right? That kind of situation, you can assume about 1% usage, right? So when the general office uses with occasional heavy traffic like large emails, attachments like that, then you can assume about 2%, right? So when you have like database access, that kind of little bit advanced system where people usually connect to the system and work, then you can assume about 20 to 50%. When you have like video conferencing, video streaming, then even one user's usage also will be high, right? So then you have to take a network utilization factor of like 70%, 80% like that. So according to the nature of the network, you have to decide of what is the network utilization factor you have to take into the consideration. Right. So this is giving you some examples of as an example and for your information. When we have 100 megabits per second connection, right? If you use multi-mode fiber and with two different light source, right? This 850 nanometer and 1300 nanometer, two different light sources, right? Two different frequencies. So if you, in this case, you can go about 300 meters, and here you can go up to 2000 meters, right? So this is multi-mode fiber. And if you are using single mode fiber for 100 megabits per second, you can go for 10 kilometers without large attenuation, right? So this is just an example. And then if you think about 1000 megabits per second, that means Giga Ethernet connection, then using multi-mode fiber, 850 nanometer with OM2, then you can go 550, and in this one you can go 550, right? Both will be the same amount. But obviously when you use single mode fiber, you can go up to 5 kilometers, right? So usually single mode fiber will be used when you are using it for a longer distance. Then if you are using 10 gigabit per Ethernet, you can go 300 meters, 400 meters with multi-mode, and single mode you can go up to 10 kilometers without a large issue, right? And here this is a small guideline about how much space you should allocate for an equipment room, right? Remember, equipment room is where we keep all our central devices in a building, right? So equipment room, where we keep our PBX in the telephone system, and all your routers and major central switches in the data network system, right? So all those central equipment that is common to the whole service will be kept at the equipment room. So equipment room should be vertically aligned with the telecommunication rooms, right? So that we already discussed. I have shown you in few examples here. In order to do the cabling properly, right? So what we have to do is align like this, okay? So your equipment room should be here. Your equipment room should be here, and your telecommunication closet should be right above the equipment room, vertically aligned, right? So when you have this, you can use this path on a wall to do all the backbone cabling, and your system will be properly designed, right? So if you have your equipment room here and one telecommunication closet here and another telecommunication closet, then it will be a very complicated system, right? So avoid all those issues. If you, first of all, when you like at the first beginning of the design of the building, you have to allocate spaces for the equipment room and then plan the telecommunication closets or the telecommunication rooms according to the space you require for the floor in a vertically aligned one line, right? So then most of your installation issues can be like taken care. So buildings up to 50,000 square meter area, usually equipment room should be sized at least 12 meters per second. Sorry, 12 square meters, right? So a building up more than 50,000, up to 50,000 square meter area, the total building floor area, you can, about a 12 square meter equipment room will be enough, right? In large buildings, minimum size should be increased 1 square meter for every increase of 10,000 of total area. For example, if you have 60,000 square meter area, right? 60,000 square meter area, that means from 50,000, there is a 10,000 increase. Then you should add 1 square meter to this 12 meter. That means total should be about 13 square meter area, right? So if, for example, if you have a 100,000 square meter area, that means you have 50,000 square meter more. That means you have to add 5 square meter to the equipment room. That means 12.5 is 12 plus 5 is 17 square meter area will be required when you have a 100,000 square meter area total building floor, right? And then according to number of outlets served, right? So how many points you are going to serve from this, all your telecom, like telephone points, data points, and then CCTV or whatever the other systems that you are going to connect to the structured cabling system. According to the total number of outlets also, you can decide on a minimum square floor space, and a typical dimension is also given as a guide, right? So remember, this is like a guide for you to decide at the design stage about how much area should be required for equipment room. Because at the design stage, we don't know the sizes of the equipment, all those things are not there, right? So then at the first initial design concept, you should allocate the equipment room spacing. To do that, you can use either of these two methods to get an idea about what size equipment room will be required for your building. And the other one is when we install wall plates, right? So for telecommunication, for networking, those situations we install wall plates vertically. These are the heights that is recommended, right? So if you are using above the table, usually about 48 inches, and normally we install at this side 18 inches. And then maximum distance between two usually should be about 6 meters, right? You are not going to go more than 6 meters for that. And when you connect from the computer to a network point, usually it should not be more than 5 meters, right? So that is to stop the attenuations and stop the data losses. Okay, so these are some guidelines you can use when you design a system. You can just go through this and see, right? So this gives you an guideline or what are the things that you should consider when you are designing a data cabling and a structured system, right? Usually most of these things we have already discussed. So I will not go through one by one. You can have a look later, right? So from there we come to the end of the structured cabling system, right? So basically the very basic things what we have to remember is about this patch cabling arrangement, which is very important part of the structured cabling. Everywhere when there is a connection, we use a patch panel. And then these 6 components, right? What are the meaning of these 6 components? And whenever you install or whenever you design this kind of ELV system, you have to arrange everything according to this, right? So central the equipment at the equipment room, whatever the incoming cables and incoming equipment will be at the, that means your service provider's equipment will be at the entrance facility. Then from the equipment room to the floors, there will be a backbone cabling going. And from at the each and every flow, all the equipment that you need for the flow should be kept at the telecommunication closet. Then from there, through patch panels, you should have a horizontal cabling. And from the horizontal cabling, we make the connections from the telecommunication closet to the work area. Right? So that is the basic concept. So every system that you are going to design and install should be aligned with this concept, and all the central equipment of all the services should be at the equipment room. All the flow the equipment that you need for the flow for each and every service should be at the telecommunication closet, right? So that is the basic idea that you should get about structured cabling, and we have discussed other things a little bit in detail. Right. So any questions about structured cabling system? Right. So no questions. Right. So then we can move to our next topic. We have for ancillary one, under this part, we have two more services to discuss. One is the the telephone systems or voice communication systems, and the other one is PA system, right? Public addressing system. So now I will start the telephone system. Right. So voice system, right? Or as we know, telephone system. Right. So just tell me, why do we need a separate telephone system for a building, right? Can't we, like what we have at our homes, can't we just have, like, if there are, let's say, 50 people, we take 50 telephone connections from the telephone supplier, like Sri Lanka Telecom or that kind of telecommunication supplier, we take 50 telephone connections and then do the system. Rather than doing that, why are we going for our own internal telephone system? What is the purpose? So usually for the voice, we have a service provider's voice network connected to our building, right? So now if you take your home, if you have a land phone, that means you take from your, like usually it will be Sri Lanka Telecom in Sri Lanka, because we have only about one wired connection service provider. So from them, we take a line and connect to our telephone at our home, right? So at a building also, can't we use the same one? So if you have, let's say you want 20 telephone users are there, so we take 20 connections from the Sri Lanka Telecom and do it, right? So without doing that, why are we designing this type of internal telephone system? What is the reason? Right. So one thing is intercommunication, right? So, but intercommunication now, even with the other system, we can do it, no? So you have 100 lines, like you have 10 lines, then you can, like each of them will have numbers. So if you want, you can communicate. What is the issue in that model? Right. So one thing is management, right? So administration wise, management wise, maintaining number of telephone lines with the service provider is little bit difficult. That is one. Other than that, what are the other advantages when you have an internal telephone system? I'm sure, like most of you are, since you are working, you may have used, like internal exchange system, you may have used. What are the other advantages that we have from that kind of system? Mm. Yeah. So it is your own system, right? So it will not depend at operational wise, it will not depend on the service provider. So only thing is, if there is issue with the service provider, your outgoing connections will not be there, but internal communication can be done without any issue, right? So that is one. And the other one is administration wise, payment wise, it is easier, and also sometimes it is cheaper, right? So initial cost, of course, you will have to bear a large cost when you have a public exchange system for your building. But if you think about the telephone charges wise, if you have internal system, then you don't get charged basically for any internal communication you have, right? So then in that situation, you are expensive, the cheapness is there, and as you said, you don't have to depend on the service provider's network for the internal communication. Those are two advantages. Right. Other than that, what are the other added advantages or added benefits you have when you have this kind of system? Operational wise, what are the other things that you can do with this public exchange system? Now, let's say now somebody wants to speak to me, right? At our university, you want to make a call and speak to me, so you don't have my mobile number, so then you want to make a landline call, right? Now, let's say our university didn't have this private exchange, and then what will happen? So for each and every person, now for my telephone at my desk, there will be a separate number, right? Not one number. So you have to know that number when you want to make a call for me, right? But when you have a private exchange, what will happen? So let's say you want to make a call for me through the landline. So what do you usually do? What will you do? So do you want to know my the number at my telephone at my table to give me a call? Right, extension number is there, but you don't need to even know that, right? So usually what will you do if you want to make a from through the landline, if you want to make a call to me, then what is the number you will dial? Sorry? Yeah, there is an operator. Usually you will call one number, right? So if you want to speak to anybody, to me or to the exam division or to the vice chancellor or anybody, you will have to just call our general line number, right? And from there, through operator or any kind of system, your call will be directed to the relevant person, right? But otherwise, if you think now, if you didn't have that and we had 100 connections to each and every person from the service provider, then you have to exactly know what is my line, right? So then only you can give a call, right? So that is another advantage. So for the people who are calling from outside, for the customers or any kind of person who is outside, you can just call one number and from there the call can be transferred, right? So call transferring and that internal, whatever the routing calls to here and there is another advantage that you have, right? But when you have separate lines, you cannot do that, right? Then you will have to say, please call this number and then you can contact that person, right? So that is another advantage. So like that, what are the other advantages usually in a public exchange system that you have? So basically you can transfer calls, right? Because of that, you can ask the people coming from outside to call one number, and from there, if you want, you can, if you know the extension number, you can dial the extension number directly, or you can get the help of the operator and get the call transferred to the relevant place. Any other things that you know? What you can do? So you can have automatic announcement kind of thing when you have public exchange, right? So when somebody calls you, you can play a certain recorded message from which you can give information if you want. If you want to give information about any campaign or anything that about your office, then you can, your institute, then you can do that through that, right? Like that, there are so many different added benefits you can add to a voice network when you have your own network, right? So that will be beneficial for your internal communication, and other than that, for the users or for the people who are calling from outside also, that kind of system can be benefited in many ways, right? So those are the basic things that we can get when you have for the building its own telephone system. Right. So I just for you to get a brief idea and to get an introduction to our discussion. So I hope you know these things, right? You must have seen these things. So the first telephones were wired from one user directly to the other user, right? So that the telephone that Alexander Graham Bell invented, right? So usually the two telephones were connected like this. So you take the receiver from this side, and lift the receiver from this side and speak, and then this person can hear what you speak, right? So this is the first basic telephone system you had. And then there was switchboard system, right? What is a switchboard system? So we have some telephones. So they are connected to this kind of one switchboard, right? So then you take the receiver and dial or do something. Then from here, somebody will take your connection and ask to whom you want to speak, right? So then you say, I want to speak to this person. Then this person, what usually there are ladies who was doing this, like what will she do? She will take a cable or a wire and connect from your point to the person who you want to make the call, right? So this connection was made manually, right? So you call this switchboard, then the switchboard operator will ask to where do you want to make the call, and according to that they will manually make the connection, and then from there you can take the call, right? So that was the first type of telephones that were used, right? And later this switching system, or we call this a switching, right? It's a switching the calls from one point to the other point, became automatic, right? So automatic switching or central office switch was patented by somebody called Alman Stroger in 1891, right? So this figure is giving you how this usually telephone will work, right? So I'm sure you know this, right? You have already I think you may have made thousands of calls, so you know what is this process happening. So it is just explained through a flow chart in this picture. So can you just look at the picture and try to understand what is mentioned here? And then we can have a small discussion. Right? So now A is trying to make a call to B, right? So what will first happen? What is the first step of A making a call to B? A will, what does A have to do first of all? Yes. From this side user, what is the first step of taking a call? Yes, so when you want to make a call first, what you have to do?
Dial the number.
No, before dialing the number, there is something you have to do. Yes?
Receiver or
Yeah, you have to take the receiver, right? You have to take the receiver. So that is called off hook, right? You take as soon as you lift the receiver from your like the telephone set, a signal will be sent from phone A to the switching center. That means your exchange at the service provider where your phone line is connected, that the hook, the receiver is out of the hook, right? So that signal is sent. As soon as that switching center will send you a signal, dial tone, right? So you will receive that, you will hear the dial tone when the switching center will send you that signal, right? So first of all, off hook signal goes to the switching center, and the switching center will send you a signal with dial tone. So then you will hear the dial tone, right? So then only you can dial, right? So then what do? You dial the number that you want to make the call. So switching center will understand, okay, now this person wants to make a call to this phone B, right? For the simplicity, we will assume A and B are connected to the same exchange, but the same system will happen even if you are in two separate exchange, right? So then from the exchange to the exchange also there will be some communication. But for like simplicity, we will assume that both of them are connected to one. So then when you dial the number of B, switching center will understand, okay, A wants to take a call to B. Then it will send a signal to the phone B with call signal, a signal called call signal. So when you receive the call signal, something will happen at phone B. What is that? What will happen when you get the call signal from the exchange to phone B? What will happen to phone B?
ring.
Right, phone B will start ringing, right? And on the same time, and when this call signal is sent, again, switching center will send a message to the phone A that you are on a call, right? So how can you get that? When you get that signal, what will you hear from the phone A? Now, first you hear the dial tone and then you dial the number, right? And then that information will be sent to phone B and the phone B will start ringing. And at the same time, you will also get a message that you are on a call. And on the same time, what will happen? You will hear something from phone A. What is that? You will hear the ringing tone, right? So that phone B is ringing at the end, you will hear from A, right? So that you will hear when you get the send info on the call message, right? So when you get that, you will hear the phone B ringing, right? So then what will happen? After some time, B will lift the receiver, and that also you will hear that the receiver has been lifted. So then both of you will talk, right? So you will keep on talking, and after so that talking will, now in that situation, there will be a temporary direct connection from phone A to phone B through the switching center, right? So there will be one connection through which you do all this voice communication. And after that, somebody will put the receiver down, right? So that information will come to the exchange, and that exchange will send that message to the phone B that you have, the other person has hanged up the phone, and then this person will also hang up, and then the connection will be separate, right? Now, after that, there is no connection between A and B. Again, when A wants to or B wants to take a call, the same process will happen, right? So it's a sequence of messages that is sent by the switching center to two parties who want to make the call. So during that period where you have the call, you have this connection from A to B, and after that, that connection will be lost. Again, when there is another requirement for a call, again, a temporary connection will be made from one phone to the other phone. Okay? So this is the automatic switching process that is usually happening at a public exchange. That means, where like public exchange means, now if you have your phone and I have my phone, and all our phones will be connected to one exchange, right? So one exchange means if you are close by, let's say everybody is in Ratmalan area, will be connected to one exchange, right? And another area, everybody will be connected to another exchange, and the exchanges are interconnected through a large network. So that is how we make calls, right? So this process that is happening at a public exchange, with the same thing will happen at your building, inside your building, when you have your own system, right? When you have your own system at your building, within the building, this whole process will happen with a smaller level telephone exchange at your building, right? So that is the basic operation of a telephone system that you have inside a building, right? That is like a mini version of the larger telephone system that we have. Okay, so I hope it is clear, the automatic switching process. Any questions? Right. So then we'll move to the next point, voice system within a building, right? So voice system within a building, there are users, they can be the workers of, if it is like a office place, it will be a workers, or the residents. If it's an apartment or that kind of place, it's a residence in a building, right? So there are a number of users in a building. So they have two communication requirements. One is to communicate within the building, the users or the people within the building, and the other one is to communicate to the outside of the building, right? So there are two requirements. So usually, what will be the higher number of communication through what? Is it within the building communication or outside the building communication? What do you think? What do you think? Which one will be higher? Or will it depend on the type of the building? Yes, what do you think? Now let's say it is something like a building where people, like it's an office building. What type of communication will be more? Yes, students? Do you understand my question? I'm asking. Now there are two types of calls that any building will have, right? You make calls within the building. That means two people within the building talk to each other. And there are situations where the customers or anybody outside from the institute call to your building, right? So call to somebody inside. So what kind of calls will be bigger, like larger number? Will it be in internal calls or calls going to outside, or calls coming from outside? Outside. Don't you think that will depend sometimes according to the nature of the building also? Only, yeah. Yeah. So if there are, like you have like constant communication with customers, then there will be most of the time more calls from outside, right? But if it is, let's say, a large building where a lot of like internal processes are going on, like let's say a place like some building like maybe a government building where there are a lot of internal processes going on, and it's a large building where people cannot go and talk to each other like physically, then in that kind of nature of building, sometimes internal calls may be more, right? So there are some kind of institutes where the customers don't usually call, right? They will take a email, or they will take some other way of communication with the institute. Usually it will be most of the time within the building communication, right? So according to the type of or the nature of your building, then that will vary. To facilitate this communication need, the building requires the following things, right? So what are the things you require? So usually, first of all, you need telephones, right? And then if you are planning to make any communication through the computers, that means you take calls through the computers, then you need computers. And then you need a central device which will like connect everything together, right? So it can be something called PABX, Public Automatic Branch Exchange, or all the system we had called key telephone system, right? So either of these two, you will need to connect everything together. And to connect from the outside to the internal side, you need a telephone line. So if you have only few users, you can use a normal telephone line, but usually institutes use large lines, one line where you can have multiple connections together, right? So you have only like physically you have one line, but that one line can take number of calls at one time, right? So those are called like ISDN lines, E1 lines, like trunks. There are so many different names according to the technologies they use. So basically you need a line from outside to the internal to make your voice system connected to the outside, and within the building you need the telephones and a central device that will connect everything together and do the switching, right? So that is the basic requirement for a voice system. So when you design this kind of private telephone system, you need to find out what is most suitable communication system for the organization, right? So to do that, you need which people in your organization need phones and what type of features they'll need. Now, first of all, sometimes maybe not all the people in your building need a phone, right? Sometimes you can have one phone to share with few people, right? So that is what usually will happen in offices, right? So, and then sometimes you have like people with their dedicated phones. And what type of features they'll need, right? So each and every user will not need all the features that is in the system. So all the features like conference calling, voicemail, call forwarding, maybe everybody will not need, right? So there are some people, according to the role that they have to perform, they will need the certain advanced features also. So that you have to decide, and how many users, what level of features they need. So primary telephone systems allow the interconnection of multiple telephones within the private network with each other and provide for the sharing of telephone lines from public telephone network, right? So usually, let's say you have let's say like this, you have 10 telephones, right? 10 telephones. Then let's assume now these are connected to this private exchange, right? So everybody is connected. So if you want to make an internal call, this private exchange will do the switching, right? Now from here, now we have 10 telephones from the public exchange to outside. We call this system PSTN, Public Switch Telephone Network, right? Which is the outside telephone network. The whole network is called PSTN, Public Switch Telephone Network. To the PSTN, for these 10 telephone lines, how many physical telephone lines we need? Is it only 1, 2, 3, or 10? How many lines we need? Will we need actually 10 lines for these 10 telephones? Will we need 10 lines to outside? What do you think? Now we have 10 telephones internally. So they are connected to this private exchange. From the private exchange, anybody can talk to each other. So 10 telephones can talk to each other without any issue. Now these 10 users want to make calls to the outside also. So that means you should have telephone lines coming in from this public switch telephone network. That is our public telephone network to the building. Now I am asking, how many lines? Like lines means physical telephone lines. You know, in a physical telephone line, you can make only one call per line, right? At one time. So how many lines should we take from the PSTN to the public exchange? Is it one line, 2 line, or 10 lines? What is the number? How are you going to decide on that?
One line.
Obviously, you will only need one line, right? So then, if you have one line, let's say this person is making a call to the outside, can the other people call outside? When this person is taking a call to the outside, can the other people make calls?
Can't.
To the outside, I'm asking, not to each other.
Can't.
Can't, right? Because I told you, usually one line, you can make one call, right? So, you know, at your homes also, if you have a like two telephones, two sets, sometimes people have one at the ground floor, another one at the top floor, right? The upper floor. So when you make a call from the ground floor telephone, you cannot make another call from the other one, right? When you lift the phone, you will hear that call going. So usually one line, you can make only one call. So when you have 10 telephones, if you have one line, when somebody talks to the other side, others cannot talk, right? So if it is okay for your system, then it is okay, right? So, but obviously will you need 10 telephone lines from here to here? What do you think? 10 telephone lines? Do you think that is required? 10 telephone outgoing lines from the exchange to the public switch telephone network? No, right? So then if you have one only, then the issue is when somebody talks, other people will not be able to talk, right? So the number of telephone lines you need from the outside to the inside, to the outside network will depend on the nature of your system, right? So if it is okay for the other 10 people to wait until that person makes the call, then you decide only having one line. But if you want, you can have 2 or 3 lines so that the people can share it. So if you have 2 or 3 lines, the probability of people have to wait until the other person takes the call will be limited, right? Because obviously all 10 people are not going to make calls to the outside together. No? So that means you don't need 10 lines. But whether you need 3 lines or 4 lines or 5 lines, that will depend on your system. But what is usually happening is now you will have number of lines connected from the exchange to the outside. So these lines will be shared by the users within your building, right? So that is the basic idea. So any questions up to now? Right. So voice systems for buildings, usually like in today's scenario, we have like 3 major types of buildings called key telephone systems, public automated branch exchange, and computer telephony integration, right? Or computer through the calls made through computer, right? So out of these 3, this key telephone system is a very old technology that normally now people don't use, right? But there are some special situations where people use them. And then the most commonly used one is called private automated branch exchange. That is what you will find in most of the buildings in Sri Lanka, if you see now. And then you have the computer telephone integration. That is a more modern system where you don't have separate telephones as such, and you use your computers that is in the building to make the calls, right? So that's a different system. Through the data network, you do it, right? So if you take these 3 systems, all these 3 systems have a traditional system and an IP system, right? What do you mean by the traditional system and the IP system? Any idea? Now, IP is what? Internet protocol, right? So what does this internet protocol has to do with this telephone system? Now, even CCTVs, I'm sure you may have now heard, there are IP CCTV. What is the meaning of IP CCTV or IP telephone compared to a traditional one? Yes? What is IP? When you say IP telephone or IP CCTV, what does that mean? Now, usually you may have seen the telephone connections, how we make the connection, right? So we have your telephone set at one location. So through the telephone port that is on the wall, through a cable going from the cable will be going directly from your phone to the telephone exchange, right? So that is commonly, that is what will happen even at your, at your office building internal telephone system, or the system that we have at our homes from our telephone to the central or the public exchange at the service provider. One line will be going, right? So you have a dedicated telephone lines in that situation, right? When you have a traditional system. But when you have IP system, what do? We take the phone and connect to where? To a, connect to a, sorry? Connect to the network. Network means to which device are we going to connect? From telephone, your connection will be to which device? What kind of device? No, PABX through what? Now, traditional system means you have the telephones, right? You have the telephones like this, and we have a PABX, right? So you have individual connections from your, let's say from your wall plate, you have a wire going from your wall plate to the exchange, right? Direct connection. There can be some panels or whatever in between, but there are no any devices, right? So you go like this. This is the traditional system, right? Sorry. This is traditional, right? This one. IPPBX means what? Sorry? Yes, through what? I couldn't hear your answer properly. Yeah, so IP address means where you should connect. What is the device? So it's basically a data network, right? So it's the same concept. If now let's say these are computers, so you want to connect them to a IP network. So what is this device? Then this will be, if these are computers, what is this device you are connecting first? To what? Now we learned. We spend so much of time for data communication network lectures because of this. Now every system will be converting to IP system, telephone, PAS. So this is what is this device? Network switch, right? So your telephones will be connected to a network switch, right? So if it's a small system, your PABX also will be connected to the network switch. And then through the switch, you will be do the communication with the IP addresses, right? Like how computers talk to each other, right? So let's assume it's a little bit larger system. So then this switch will be connected to a central switch. Through that, you have a PABX connector, right? IP PABX. And then you have another switch in another floor. To that, other computers will be, the telephones will be connected, right? And then through that, you do the communication, right? These telephones will be connected to the PABX through the IP system or a data network, right? So then we don't have a separate wiring as such for telephone, right? So you will be using a data infrastructure. So these switches, central switches, flow-wise switches will be placed, planning to use them for computer communications, data communication, and voice communication both, right? So your voice communication will happen through the data network, right? So that is called IP system. So IP system basically mean you use this data infrastructure or the data networking system that you have in your building to connect the other devices together as well, right? So if you are using, let's say, IP CCTV, so then your CCTV cameras will be connected to a switch, and your central, the video server and the recording devices also will be connected through the IP system to the cameras, and then the system will work like how normal computers work, right? So that is the IP system, okay? So all these three types, now this one is of course, anyway, it's IP system. For key telephone system and IP system, earlier we used traditional systems where they had their own wiring dedicated for voice communication. Now we use IP system, right? And then PBX or the public branch exchange also, you have two options. You can keep it inside your building. That is called the in-house operation, or hosted out, right? So you can use a telephone exchange that is not a public exchange, an exchange dedicated for you, but will be hosted somewhere else. Will be kept at a data center or any other place, special place that is where they are specialized for maintaining that kind of equipment. So that option is also there. So basically you have three types of telephone system. Key telephone system, which is very old. The most common one is private automated branch exchange, or PABX, or computer telephone system. So PABX also we have the traditional and IP, right? Okay. So that is the overall idea of what are the different types of voice systems options available as of now. So key telephone systems, I will just give you a small idea, but usually now we don't use them because it's a very old technology now. So I hope it is clear about the IP system. When you have IP telephone system, what will happen? I hope it is clear. Whatever the devices that you need to connect together to the operation of the voice system, they will be connected through the data network, right? So that is the meaning of IP. Any IP system means that you use that IP communication method to communicate with each other rather than having your own separate wiring for that service. Okay. So any questions about that? Right. So then we will very briefly look at what is a key telephone system. So key telephone systems are used within a small office or a branch office, right? So very small arrangement, very small number of telephones if you have to connect together, then a key telephone system is a good option. For example, key system might distribute 48 internal telephone sets over 16 external telephone lines, right? So let's say you have 16 lines coming in and you have 48 telephone sets in the system, right? So now you want to share these 16 lines within the 48 telephone lines, right? So then in that kind of situation, you use a key telephone system. So the company would pay for 16 individual lines, but you have actually 48 telephone sets operating. User selects outside line by pressing the corresponding line button on the key set phone, right? So usually what you will have is something like this. Right? So this is your exchange, right? I mean the public exchange, service providers exchange. From the service providers exchange, you get number of lines. Let's say now this example, you have 16 lines, right? So then you get 16 lines to the key telephone switching unit, right? Key ASU means key telephone switching unit. So you get these 16 lines. Now these are the people who wants to make calls, right? So now in your telephone set, right? So you will see something like this, line 1, 2, 3, like that. There will be number of buttons given, or there is a certain way you have to select through which line you want to make the call outside, right? So very old technology, many telephone lines come into the certain phone, light comes in if the line is busy. A user takes the control of a line by pressing the button, right? So it can also provide the intercom capabilities, right? Intercom capabilities means like talking to each other within the building, that can be done. But most of the time it is, it has been designed for the purpose of making calls outside. So let's say I want to lift the phone, right? So I want to make a call. So I lift the receiver and then I press line 1, right? So when I press line 1, so if there is another person taking a call through the line 1, so then there will be some indication to me through a light or something that the line is busy, right? So then what I have to do? So now there are, let's say, 48 telephones and 16 lines, right? So that is the arrangement. Now I am one of those 48 telephones, so I lift the handset and then I press line 1 to make a call through line 1, because I am making the choice or selection of the line that I want to make a call. So line 1 is already occupied. So I get a busy tone, somehow busy tone or a light from which I understand now it is busy. Then what should I do? Now line 1 is busy. Then what should I do? Like you try another line, right? So that line also may be busy, right? So then I will have to keep on doing this until I find a line that is vacant, right? So that will be what? Is it a user-friendly system or is it a difficult system? What do you think? it's a little bit difficult, right? So if you have like, let's say number of phones, right? Let's say about like these 48 phones, right? So then people will have to like make an extra effort to take a call, right? Because the problem is users at once cannot see which lines are busy, right? So if they know which lines are busy, then very easily they can go to a line that is not busy. But here the system is you have to like keep on trying and see, right? So that is the main disadvantage of a key telephone system. Although it's a very less complicated and a very inexpensive system, the problem is the users have to select by their own what is the vacant line, right? So which is little bit troublesome, right? So they are still manufactured and supported today, but very rapidly becoming outdated. So the advantages are smaller, cheap, and user installable, right? So you can do it by yourself. Disadvantages are less flexible, does not have the advanced features like call transferring, all those call waiting, those things are not there. And the less flexibility is like the main disadvantage is the switching process or the telephone line selection process is not automated, right? The users are responsible for that. So typically, this is how it will look like. So here you will get those lines through which you want to make the call. Right. So because of all the disadvantages and the limitations of the key telephone system, what we use now very commonly is called the private branch exchange, right? So it is called private branch exchange or PABX, where the A is for automated, right? Private automated branch exchange. Anyway, it's an automated system, but you can, if you want, you can make the help of the operator as well. So it's a telephone system within the institute that switches call within the enterprise on local lines while allowing all users to share a certain number of external lines to the central office, right? So you will have basically that switching process that I explained, what will happen between two calls in a public branch exchange, the same thing will happen here, right? So that exchange that is having by the service provider is called a public branch exchange, right? Because public, right? Most like it is shared by many people. But this private branch exchange means it is within your building and it is shared only by your institute, right? It is dedicated for you. So that is the difference between those private and public, right? So the main purpose of a PBX is to save the cost of requiring a line for each user to the telephone company central office, right? So as I explained in the beginning, so what we want to do is reduce the number of connections we have with the telephone service provider and as much as possible do our internal communication within our premises. Right. So in this private branch exchange, right? So let's say you have number of lines coming in from the outside and we have the telephones connected, right? So usually you may have seen these telephones have a number, right? What is that number is usually called what? The number, the telephones have individual numbers, right? Usually they are called what? Yes, they have a certain name. What is that name called? Extension, right? So they are called the extensions, right? So from this line, you have the extensions to these lines, right? So these have extension numbers. Usually it's a 4-digit number, right? So usually PABX, we give a 4-digit number to each line, right? So PABX intelligently decide how to route a call for the lowest cost, right? So let's say now A wants to make this, let's say number like 4500 wants to make call to the outside, right? Now in the key telephone system, 4500, like 4500 had to select which line out of these lines you are going to use, right? But in the public exchange system, it will make the decision, right? It will make the connection from here to here or from here to here and from here to here according to availability and if there is any cost difference according to that, right? So it is up to the public branch exchange to make the call, right? Switching process that is now automated. Nobody has to do it by yourself and try to find the vacant line, right? So a private branch exchange is a telephone switch that serves a particular business or service as opposed to one that telephone company operates, right? So that is what I told you, right? So the one that you have in your building is called the private branch exchange. This other one is called the public branch exchange. So this process of finding an external line and connecting it is now handled by the PBX, right? So it is intelligently deciding how to write a call, how to route the call in the correct manner. So PBX makes connections among the internal telephones of a private organization and also take calls from the public switch telephone network, right? So I told you this public system is called PSTN via a trunk line like T1, right? So you have lines, these lines are called E1 or T1 or that kind of thing, right? So basically it is one line, right? So this is called usually a trunk line. They have like different names like E1, T1 like that. They call a trunk line, right? So trunk line means basically one line, right? It's a physically one line, but within that one line, you can make number of calls together, right? So it's like you put all the calls together and send it over one line, right? It's a different technology that we use to do that. So you use this trunk where you actually, what you do is, now when we make a call, like now let's say I speak like this, right? So you may hear it as a continuous speech, right? But if you break my voice signal to very small time periods, you can see there are a lot of stops where I don't speak, right? So what is done in this kind of system is you break the call into small pieces, right? And then you take other call also, break into small pieces, and then now let's say you put one piece of my voice, next you send another piece of another call, and again another piece of another call, and then again my one, another one, like that, right? So because even though there is a small delay where my part is not heard, from the other side it will be not identified, right? Why that is happening? Because the time periods are very small, so that is that difference, or that whatever the data loss is very small. And anyway, we have pauses in our speech, so from the receiver side, it will not be a large issue, right? So basically what you do is you integrate all the calls to one line and send. So it's a particular technology that we are using for that. So that line is called a trunk line. So the E1 or T1 or whatever the type of trunk will determine how many calls or how many connections you can have at one go, right? So all this part of integrate or connecting this E1 and T1 to the telephones and then doing the call is handled by the PBX, right? So what is as I told you, the difference between PBX and key system is users of key systems manually select their own outgoing lines, while the PBX select the outgoing line automatically, right? So that is the main difference between a key telephone system and a public branch exchange. Right. So these are some points that we have already discussed, right? So public branch exchange, it is owned by the individual company and performs call routing and switching. It can do the call switching and call routing. What do you mean by a call routing? What is the difference between a routing and a switching? So switching means this person wants to take a call to outside, so you connect these two lines together. Or this person wants to call to this exchange, then you make a connection between these two. It's a switching. What is a call routing? Right? Call routing is basically something like a call transfer, like what you do in call transferring, right? So I talk to one person, now you from the outside line, you talk to the operator, and the operator will transfer your call to another extension, right? So then it's a call routing. You send it to some other place, right? Route, right? So you can do the routing and switching to a public branch exchange, right? So allows the business to save money because not as many connections to the PSTN are provided. So people are sharing the outgoing lines, right? So it's a cost save. And also whatever the internal calls will be within your system, right? So confidentiality wise also it's better, right? So those are few points about the public branch exchange. So these are suitable for medium to large organizations. A PBX system allows many extensions within the business to call to each other and the PSTN. It controls all incoming and outgoing calls, connecting outside callers with inside extension lines and internal extensions with each other. The private branch exchange is a computer control switch, right? It's a switch that is running according to certain pre-given program thing, right? So when somebody calls, right, there are two options in a public branch exchange. Either the call can go to auto attendant or operator, or you can use both, right? What do you mean by auto attendant? When you call a certain organization, right, there are two types of things that can happen. Let's say you call to a bank, right? You call to a bank. So there are two types of things that can happen. I'm sure you must have experienced both. What are the two types, right? You will be can be connected to 2 points at the initial stage. What are the 2 points? Yes? When usually you call to this kind of bank or that kind of place, what will you hear first? Yeah. Or wait for the operator's assistance, right? Yeah, right. So that is the auto attendant, right? So auto attendant means like a particular program that you run to any incoming call, right? So you can have, like, if you want, you can have some promotional, recording or something, or you can have a greeting like welcome to whatever, like bank, and then say something. And then after that you say, if you know the extension, please dial, right? So if you know the extension, when you give the extension, the PABX will automatically connect you to that extension, right? So let's say I call and I want to take extension 1. So I dial, after that recording, if I dial extension 1, it will be automatically going to that, right? So there the call is handled by auto attendant, right? So, but there are a lot of situations where the person may not know the extension. That is what usually will happen. So then what will happen is that call will be after that auto attendant message. If that person is not dialing anything, it will be forwarded to the operator, where the operator can manually transfer the call to the required place, right? So that is what will happen in a private branch exchange when you call, right? So this is the operator's console, right? What you have in an operator. So usually it will have like a lot of advanced buttons because you need to do a lot of additional things. And then here there will be indications on the lines, right? Different extension lines, whether they are on a call or not, the operator can see from here, right? So operator will have this kind of special console. All other people will have normal telephone. So to the PBX, what type of connections will be there? Usually there will be extensions. That means the internal telephones that you are connecting. And then you have an attendant console, special one, right? So the operator may have also a computer, if required, connected, from where he or she can make whatever necessary changes. And then the PBX, you can connect to a public switch telephone network. That means our normal telephone network. So usually what we use is called a E1 line or a T1 line, right? So that is the basic one that we use now. Others are like little bit like older technologies. So usually you use a trunk line called E1 or T1, through which you connect the PBX to the telephone network. And if you want to connect it to the internet, right? Let's say it's a IP PBX. Then if you want to connect it to internet and take calls over the internet, then what we use is called SIP. It's a technology called SIP. Then you need a SIP connection, right? So, and if you have another PBX in operation, if you want to make connections between those two, then that can be also done, right? So these are typically the connections that you have in a PABX system or PBX system. right? Sorry. So then main accessories needed to install a PABX system, right? So what are the basic things that is required, right? So you have something called main distribution frame, right? So main distribution frame is something like, even the public branch exchange has it, right? So it's like something like that patch panel arrangement that I told you, right? So let's say you have incoming lines coming in, right? So that is from, can be from the outside or internal telephones, right? You have all the coming in to this side, and then here you have the connections to the PABX, the device, right? The device to, you have the actual connections, right? So what you do in an MDF, main distribution frame, is you have this kind of connections, right? From here to here, from this one to this one, this one to this one, you have connections. And if you want, you can make these connections change, right? You can interconnect different points together, right? So this is especially advantageous when you want to do some changes later, or if you want to add some new points, right? So main MDF arrangement is easier, right? So what you do is, you don't directly connect the line to a PABX, you go through a MDF, where at that point you can interchange if you want, right? So this is right, the same concept that we have in touch panels, where you can use this as a very easy way of making changes or doing the maintenance, right? Or repairing, right? So MDF is required. And if you have lines coming from outside, outside lines, usually we have a surge protection to protect from lightning. And you need to give power to the PABX, usually use the isolation transformer. That means you take the power and through a transformer you supply. Why? Because this PABX is very voltage sensitive, right? So what you do is, through a isolation transformer, you take the power and supply to this, right? One thing is, this is having a special voltage requirement, not usually 230. And the other thing is, it is very voltage sensitive. So you have to regulate the voltage supply. So we use isolation transformer. And battery backup, when the power is not there, the PABX should work. So then there is a battery backup. And compute, and also a UPS system, right? For emergency. And then computer and printer for call billing software, right? So if you have a call billing software, if you want to take records of which person has talked to which person, like that, and what are the durations and that kind of call details, then you need that. Then for additionally, also you can use some lightning protectors. And then earth rod and plate, right? So you have to earth this, right? You have to earth this public exchange properly, and the earth resistance at the earthing point should be less than 10 ohms, right? Because that is very critical in order to protect this from over voltages and the lightning and everything. This earthing is very much important, right? Because PABX is a complete electronic system. So if you get any voltage surges, you can experience very major damages. So because of that, you have to be very careful about the over voltages and the surges that is coming into the PABX, right? So then earthing should be done properly. So this is a typical system, right? So as I explained, you have the MDF, main distribution frame, to which you connect all the extension lines and the lines coming from outside, right? So whatever the line coming from outside, you have to have a surge protector first, and from there we connect to the MDF. So from the MDF, you have the connections to the PABX, and then you can make the connections like this, right, manually. And then for the power, you have isolation transformer and also a battery backup for emergency with UPS, and you have to earth it. Okay. Right. So any questions up to now? PABX? So I hope it is clear, right? So you have the extension lines and the surge the lines coming from outside is coming through a surge protector. And then we don't directly connect everything to the PABX. You have an MDF arrangement, right? like the patch panel, where you can make the connections interchange later if you want for some reason, right? And then for the power, you need isolation transformer and also a battery backup with UPS when there is no utility power. Right. So these are the different things that you can have, these features that you can activate on a public branch exchange, right? So I'm sure you know most of these things, so I'm not going to give one by one, right? So things like night service, right? So in the night, you can direct the call to somewhere else, right? All incoming calls, if you want, you can direct it to a like a security point or whatever that kind of place. So you can have night special announcement or something like that. That is one thing, right? And then automatic call distribute is a function. If you have like number of incoming calls and then there is no operator, you can assign few numbers, and to those numbers, the calls will be automatically gone, right? So let's say 10 calls are coming in. First call will be given to first number. Next one will be next one. Another one will be another one. Like automatically, it will be distributed to these numbers, and from there, those people can send the call, right? So if you don't have a dedicated telephone operator, this kind of thing is okay, good, right? Then call waiting, you know what is call waiting, right? And then call pickup. What do you mean by call pickup? Call pickup. So let's say you hear your adjoining person's phone is ringing, right? And then that person is not at the seat, right? So if you want to answer the call, one thing is you can go to that place and take the receive and call, right? All you can do is a call pickup, right? So there is a, like according to your PBX, there will be certain number given like a star or hash or whatever another code. You dial that code and then you dial your your neighbor, so your next person's number, then that person's the call incoming to that telephone will be connected to you, right? So that is called call pickup. So if there is nobody there and the phone is ringing and you want to take that call and answer, then you can do a call pickup. Right? You can press a certain code, and after that you have to press that extension number, then the call will be connected to you, right? So call parking is also something similar kind of similar kind of feature. And conference call accounting, where you can have a accounting system where the number of calls and everything will be calculated, and according to that there will be a billing, right? Voice paging means PA system. You can use the telephone system to give announcements and that kind of thing. So custom greetings, those things you know, right? Custom greetings is when an incoming call is coming, you can have a greeting, those things, right? So speed dialing, call transfers, right? So there are different things that you can have, right? So no need to activate all these features to all the users. So you can select, right? What are the features that you have to activate for different people, and according to that, or different numbers, and according to that, you can configure it according to the requirements of the business. So automated attendant, I already explained to you. Automatic call distribute also that, right? So when you don't have your own operators, you can do it. So in automatic call distributor, you can have advanced features like this, right? Prioritize the calls, right? So if you get the calls from some numbers, you can very fast, you have to send them to those one of the numbers, like one of the people who are answering, right? Prioritizing the call. Then route the calls to appropriate agents based on the skill set of the agent, right? So you can have, although you have 10 people, you can program most of the calls should go to this person, right? Like this. And then if all agents are busy, deliver call to a waiting queue and play appropriate message, right? So that also you can do. Forward calls to another call center or perform automatic return call, right? Sometimes you may have experience when you call certain call centers, if nobody picks up your phone call, then they call back and see why you call, right? So that is called a automatic return call system, right? So that is also can be activated according to the requirement, right? So if your office is a very customer oriented business and you don't want to miss any of the calls that is made by the customer, so then this is what you should do. Right. So according to the requirements of the institute or the business that this public exchange system is installed, you can customize the features that you want. Okay. So there are few important things to discuss. I think we will not have time to finish everything. Right. So what I will do is there is few points to discuss further in the PS.
Recording in progress. Recording.